This right here is the UMI Plus E. Now the E stands for Extreme Edition. It's one of the first mobile phones, at least in this price range and category, to have a whopping 6 gigabytes of RAM. Now the chipset it has is a Helio P20. It's an octa-core. Is that actually fast enough though to be able to handle all of that RAM? And will we actually get any advantages out of that? That's what I'm here to find out, so let's have a look at this mobile here in greater detail. Now just to quickly cover the specs, the main specs here, we've got a Helio P20. Now that's an octa-core with a Mali T880 GPU, 6 gigabytes of RAM, a 64 gigabyte ROM, a 4000 milliamp hour battery, wireless AC, dual SIM, that's 4G, and you can have either two micro SIMs in there or opt to put a micro SD card and micro SIM. So on the front of the mobile, we've got a 5 megapixel front-facing camera. We have a fingerprint reader down the bottom, hardware and software menu keys. The screen is 1080p. It's an IPS, 5.5 inches. On the rear, a dual-tone LED flash, 13 megapixel camera with an f2.0 aperture. The back of it's made out of metal, but the top and bottom parts are made of plastic for the antenna reception. So along the bottom, the microphone, Type-C port and loudspeaker. Now the Type-C port needs a slightly longer plug to be able to plug into that, because some of the cables that I tested out, I couldn't actually push it right in and get the cable to work. But if you use the stock one, of course, that will work just fine with it. And on the top we have a microphone and the 3.5mm headphone jack. Now on the left side there's the SIM tray. Now it's a dual SIM tray which will take either two SIMs or a SIM and a micro SD card. Below that is the quick launch button, which is by default set to launch the camera, but you can change that to your desired application. And lastly, on the right hand side, the volume up and down and power buttons. These are made out of metal, they have a good feel to them and good location. Now the build quality is good, but I wouldn't go as far to call it premium because it does have that plastic top and bottom. But it does feel solid and has easy access to the power and volume on buttons. And the fingerprint reader too there at the bottom seems to work well for me, but sometimes it can be a little bit slow, which is a minor complaint I have. So it has a 1080p panel on there, 5.5 inches with a maximum brightness of 460 lumens of brightness. Nice panel, as you can see on camera now, very deep black, so it makes it blend in with the outer bezels top and bottom quite nicely there. The whites, I would say it's more calibrated to more of a cool white color. Good colors too. And overall, a very nice panel they have used that is protected with scratch-resistant glass that has 2.5D curved edges. So in the shade here, you can see the screen is perfectly visible, no problems using it. So let's see how it fares now in direct sunlight. And I can just make it out in direct sunlight, able to make calls, send text messages without too much of a problem. Just to point out the memory use, so although it has 6 gigabytes of RAM, we're getting now finally on mobiles free 4 gigabytes of RAM. So every time you see a mobile advertised, for example, the Samsung Note 5, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and then you only get around 3 or 2.8 or 2.6 gigabytes free. So here we have a proper large amount of RAM there to fully utilize 4 gigabytes. So that is really quite good. So the ROM on it is probably one of the best things. Like the UMI Plus, it's running Android 6.0. And it's a stock Android ROM. And performance of it, it's very quick and snappy. It's excellent. It's really good. Now, because we have all of that RAM to play with, 4 gigabytes free, you can go crazy multitasking, which I'll do here. I'm just going to open up a lot of apps and show you just how we can multitask with this. Now, one of the things I have noticed that when you start to really push it, you see then animations start to slow down a little. So although we do have all that RAM, the CPU is struggling a little bit now with everything here. Now I imagine that running 6 gigabytes on a more powerful processor, it would probably be a lot smoother there. But overall, I think it's really good considering the price range of this mobile, the kind of performance the ROM has. And the RAM management is probably the best part about it. On my Samsung Galaxy S7 that I have, it will kill off tasks very quickly, so you have to reload them. But here, I can simply quickly go through them, and after 10-15 minutes, they are still there present in memory, where my Galaxy S7 would have started killing things off, and you have to do a full reload. So I haven't even loaded some of those things up there properly, but it's just to give you an idea there. So just to run through some of the benchmarks that I've run here, but first I want to show you a couple of things. So wireless update. There are a few updates that came through with this mobile. And one of the most important ones was the last one I got here, which was pushed out on the 27th of December. That added 4K video to the phone. So the ROM, when you first get it, is, you could say bloat-free, but it's not quite bloat-free because it does have a few of the Google applications on there, perhaps maybe an excessive amount of them. But you don't get UMI this, UMI that kind of software that you often see with the Xiaomi mobiles that put their own software in everything, and Li Echo, Li TV's phones too. So that's why I really like these ROMs, because they start out so bloat-free. So here is the Antutu benchmark score. Now this is version 6.2.7, and that score is, it's okay, but I honestly expected a little bit more. Now this was run in the performance mode. Now a Snapdragon 650 will score higher than this, about another 20,000 additional points. So it's not a powerhouse of a mobile, but I do believe the performance of it for the ROM and gaming, as you'll see later on in the video, is sufficient, is perfectly fine. And there's just the details there of that benchmark if you wanted to compare that to your own mobile. So now wireless AC speeds. Now I do have a 300 megabit line, and I couldn't get over 100 megabits per second out of the wireless AC, which I can on other phones. So the wireless performance isn't the fastest, but it's still quite good speeds there. And of course I did test out 4G. Okay speeds there, but that all dependent on, of course, the network, time of day, how many users are downloading from the same tower, and the Geekbench 4 score. So okay score here. I mean, multi-core score, it's an octa-core. It's not going to be as high, of course, as the deca-core mobiles. And I think, again, for the price and the type of phone this is, that this is an okay score. Now, onto battery life here. So I ran it with the normal mode, battery power saving, normal mode, not the power saving mode, just so you know. And some of this time I got. So the first day I used it, I only managed to get a screen on time of 2 hours and 8 minutes. Now, that was the first 2 days, and I wasn't happy with that result. But after charging the battery 2 more times, cycling it a few times, results improved for me, and I managed to get through a whole day with almost 5 hours of screen on time. Now, I would classify my usage as quite heavy because I was gaming on it quite a lot. And you can see the screen was the biggest consumer, of course, and then wireless. So I had wireless on the whole time, network signal on the whole time. The battery life is actually quite good. Not bad. I think I can, with my own normal kind of use, I'll be able to make 2-3 days out of this before I need to charge it up. And there's just before the battery ran down to 7%. So charging time on this to fully charge it is just under 2 hours using the supplied charger, which is okay. That is kind of the normal kind of rate. So you can get up to around 50% quite quickly in only about half an hour, or I think it's about 45 minutes. But then to fully charge, yeah, it takes about 2 hours. Okay, so gaming performance on it. It's good. All the games I have tested out have playable frame rates, but I have noticed a little bit of lag now and then. I mean, this isn't the fastest GPU, the Mali T880 MP2. It's definitely not as fast as the other versions that have 8 processing units in it. This only has 2. But the main thing is, playable frame rates at least over 30 frames per second, quite smooth gameplay. So I just turned on GPS, it got the lock very quick, and I have tested it out down in town. I've been sitting in a car as a passenger. It didn't lose my position, which was good. Current accuracy at the moment is plus or minus 2 meters, so no problems with the GPS. Not like the older generation of MediaTek chipsets that seem to be quite slow and used to lose signal. It's not the case here. So there is a single loudspeaker down the bottom. Let's have a listen to how loud it is. Okay, the quality of it sounds okay. There's a little bit of distortion there at 100%, but it's not really loud enough. It is nowhere near the loudest speaker I have heard. So I'd class that as an average to poor speaker. So when it comes to call quality, I noticed that the earpiece doesn't sound as clear and crisp as my Xiaomi Mi Max, which is my daily driver. The person on the other end said I sounded fine to them, but yeah, just a little muffled, not as good. Now the 3.5mm headphone jack outputs decent audio quality. It's not bad. Maybe not as loud as I would like it, but that's a general complaint that I have. So if you want to drive like a huge headset, you'll be disappointed with the maximum output, but in-ear earphones, perfectly fine. Here's a look at the stock camera application. So I'm now in photo mode, and the shutter rate with these kind of lighting conditions is very quick. It's instantaneous here. You can see we've got HDR, we can control the flash, and there's various other options as well here that I'll show you. So we've got face detection on, you can do burst shot, anti-flicker modes, all sort of standard stuff in there. So now over into the video mode here. Can record right up to 4K. Now if you don't have that 4K option there, that's because you're not on the latest firmware from UMI. We have Pro Photo. Just lets you control the white balance and everything like that. And there's a little dials here that you can tweak, just like the Windows Phone Pro mode that came out a few years ago. So you're able to adjust exposure, ISO, white balance, brightness, saturation. You can control all of that. So I'm going to show you now a few samples taken on the front and rear cameras in both good and low light conditions. Now the front facing camera, you can see the quality is not very good. The white balance is wrong. I would say actually cool white. It just can't seem to get it right. And it's only 480p, the resolution. So very poor, pixelated and not good front facing camera video quality. So here's a sample from the rear facing camera shot in 4K. Now if this comes out like 15 frames per second and looking really choppy, it's something to do with Adobe Premiere Pro. When I encode the final video in my reviews, this codec, and the focus just completely went then, seems to come out with only 15 frames per second. It's using the 3GP codec. Now autofocus in video can completely go way off like it just did then. That might have actually been me then with the tap to focus, which it does support. Now the bit rate in video is only 20 megabits per second in 4K, and in fact the focus just completely went then again, and I am not touching the screen, so that just shows how poor the video quality is from this mobile. So I would not be buying this if you want to record decent video. Okay, so that's my review there. I do believe that the 6 gigabytes of RAM is more of a spec draw card to get people's attention, to make people want to buy this mobile. Now, of course, on something more powerful like a Snapdragon 835, they could take use of that full 6 gigabytes of RAM and be able to actually multitask without things slowing right down. Then that 6 gigabytes will be useful, and I do see that being a future spec in 2017 flagships. But for now, on the Helio P20, it really isn't fast enough to take full advantage of that. Neither is the Mali T880 GPU. Besides that, battery life is good. It has a very nice screen on there, 1080p panel, 2.5D edge corners, and that Type-C port is a little funny with the fact that it's a longer plug. So you may need to make sure if you're going to use other cables with this, that they have a longer tip on them to make that actually work. Now the rear camera, that is quite a disappointment. Sure, we can shoot in 4K video, but the bitrate is only 20 megabits per second, which I find to be way too low for 4K video. Photo images are also hit and miss. Sometimes it just takes a reasonably good photo, and then other times it's completely wrong with the white balance, a little blurry. Low light performance also very disappointing. So overall it is an okay phone, but I do believe there are other options out there around the same price that offer better performance and have better cameras, including better battery life too. Thank you so much for watching this review. If you did like it, why not think about subscribing as well to the channel, and hopefully I will see you back with more up and coming reviews.